Perspectives. One life touches many. Poems and History about John Gilbert Jarvis, Part 1. Poems. This is a short story about how one life affects the lives of many for a century and even longer. John Gilbert Jarvis lived from 1871 to 1941. He died before some of his grandchildren were born. Among them were the twins, Paul and Priscilla Humber. But our primary interest here happens to be the women who set down in verse their experience of John Gilbert Jarvis. Their poems not only open a window into his life, but they demonstrate how deeply the lives of others are affected by what we are and what we do. The first poem we will hear was written in 1900 by Priscilla's grandmother's sister, Fanny Farr Fern Scott, who lived from 1889 to 1978. Fanny Scott wrote this poem when her older sister, Mabel, was engaged to John Gilbert Jarvis, and 11-year-old Fanny was anxiously and joyfully anticipating their future marriage. The second poem was written in 1901 by Priscilla's great-grandmother, Ann Farr Scott, who lived from 1850 to 1926. Ann Farr Scott writes her poem to her new son-in-law. This poem is a real gem. Indeed, it's one heartfelt poem with enduring literary merit. The third and fourth poems we shall consider were written by Priscilla's mother, Evelyn Audrey Jarvis Humber, who lived from 1907 to 2005. These late-in-life poems reach back to Evelyn's experiences of her father, John Gilbert Jarvis. The first remembers her father giving her away 57 years earlier, and she says she knows what that meant to him. The second reaches back to her girlhood memories, and she views him fondly as a man of kindness and strength. The family heritage poems about John Gilbert Jarvis. Gilbert Jarvis, 1900. A poem by Fanny Farr Fern Scott. This photograph of Fanny Scott was taken in 1898, when she was 9 years old and just 2 years before she wrote the poem.
Gilbert Jarvis, who is it comes so often here, and is welcome by his Mabel dear, and gives words of love and cheer. Gilbert Jarvis, who is it in the parlour sits, and talks about the Tories and grits, till everyone gets up and gets. Gilbert Jarvis. Then he clasps her in his arm, and talks about his little farm. Of course, of such there is no harm. Gilbert Jarvis. Who is it stays so very late, whose tongue goes at a rapid rate, until he starts for his father's gate? Gilbert Jarvis. Who is it that will come some day, and take his dear Mabel away, and then with him she will always stay? Gilbert Jarvis. Who's that, when settled down in life, and Mabel is his darling wife, then will end his courting strife? Gilbert Jarvis. May joy and pleasure be your lot, as through the world you trot, trot, trot.
To my son-in-law, 1901. A poem by Ann Farr Scott.
To my son-in-law, she was my dream's fulfillment, and my joy, this lovely woman, whom you call your wife. You sported at your play, an idle boy, when I first felt the stirring of her life within my startled being. I was thrilled with such intensity of love it filled the very universe. But words are vain. No man can comprehend that wild, sweet pain. You smiled in childhood's slumber, while I felt the agonies of labor, and the nights, I, weeping o'er the little sufferer knelt, you, wandering on through dreamland's fairy lights, throughout your lengthening limbs, and slept, and grew, while I, awake, saved this dear wife for you. She was my heart's loved idol and my pride. I taught her all those graces, which you praise. I dreamed of coming years, when at my side she should lend lustre to my fading days, should cling to me, as she to you clings now. The young fruit, hanging to the withered bough, but lo, the blossom was so fair a sight, you plucked it from me, for your own delight. Well, hoping you are worthy of her. Oh, thank God! And yet I do not think you realize how burning were the sands, o'er which I trod to bear and rear this woman you so prize. It was no easy thing to see her go, even into the arms of the one she worshipped so. How strong, how vast, how awful seems the power of this new love which fills a maiden's heart, for one who never bore a single hour of pain for her, which tears her life apart from all its moorings, and controls her more than all the ties the years have held before, which crowns a stranger with a kingly grace, and gives the one who bore her second place. She loves me still, and yet, were death to say, choose now between them, you would be her choice. God meant to be so, it is his way. But can you wonder, if while I rejoice in her content, this thought hurts like a knife, no longer necessary to her life? My pleasure in her joy is bitter-sweet. Your very goodness sometimes hurts my heart, because for her life's drama seems complete, without the mother's oft-repeated part. Be patient with me. She was mine so long who now is yours. One must indeed be strong to meet the loss without the least regret, and so forgive me if my eyes are wet.
Reminiscences, 1991. A poem by Evelyn Audrey Jarvis Humber.
Reminiscences. My dad gave me away 57 years ago today. What a beautiful gift, to have a dad, to lift me out from under his care, to give me two once so rare. And because my eyes were for him alone, little did I realize what it meant for you to hand me over. But now I know, and someday I hope to tell you so, and to thank you and Mother, if I failed at that time, for the cherishing love you bestowed on us then.
My Father, 1995. A poem by Evelyn Audrey Jarvis Humber.
My father stood so straight and tall, and his glance was kind above us all. His step was sure, if we stumbled along, and his hand was near, lest we should fall. His ears could hear us when we would call. His arms bespoke the strength he'd need to carry us over a perilous path. His shoulders could carry us away up high, and his aim was high for us to travel by.
These poems testify to the fact that each of us touches the lives of many, and we have deep and lasting effects on them. The graphics we have been using come from a family heritage series that narrows the focus to the bloodline of Priscilla. In her then culminates past generations. In reality, however, just as from her emanates future generations, our sphere of influence and life ever widens and never narrows. One life touches many. The life of John Gilbert Jarvis was one life that touches many. Heartfelt poems were written about him. New things came into existence because of him, not just his 7 children, who have all passed on now. The farm he worked is still there, and we remember it. The house he lived in still stands, and we still visit it. The cheese factory he helped bring into existence still supports many and delights many others when they buy his cheese. The poems about him are still heard, and we remember him. We shall be covering all these historical matters in Part 2.